Hello, and welcome to Turning the Tables. We call this Cooking to Thrive in the 21st Century because this series focuses on creating food that promotes health on both an individual and an environmental scale. We're learning master recipes designed to work with whatever you have on hand, with plenty of local and plant-based whole food ingredients. Cooking this way generates vitality and reduces environmental impacts. Flexibility in the kitchen unlocks endless flavor opportunities and makes eating a nutritionally balanced, eco-friendly food fun and intuitive. This series is sponsored by Cornell Cooperative Extension Ulster County and the Ellenville Rural Regional Healthcare Network and Stick to Local Studios. I'm Maria Reidelbach. Quick breads and muffins are really easy and actually are quick to make. You can make them with different kinds of fruits and nuts and different kinds of flours, and they are just delicious and really only take about an hour from urge to plate. So what kind of ingredients will you need? It's pretty basic. You'll need some flour or meal. You could use many different kinds. Buckwheat flour, alternative grain flours, gluten-free mixes, nut and seed flours. You'll also need some baking powder, seasonings like salt and spices. You'll need eggs, something milky, a sweetener. It could be maple syrup, could be honey, could be sugar. You'll need some oil or butter, and you'll need, of course, fruits and nuts. Equipment: a measuring cup, a measuring spoon, a baking dish, a bowl, and a spoon, and a knife. Step 1. Preheat the oven to 350 and mix your dry ingredients together. All of these measurements can be found on the website turningthetablescookbook.com. So I'm going to measure out the flour, and you don't want to pack this in. You want to just spoon it lightly and then brush the top off until it's level. Baking is more of a science than other types of cooking because you are really affecting some chemical magic. I'm going to be using half whole wheat flour and half cornmeal for this quick bread. I really like the flavor of cornmeal and blueberries together, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm mixing those two dry ingredients together. This is generally the procedure you follow with most recipes, baking recipes. Now I'm going to level off that spoonful. There's a nice little leveling straight edge on the baking powder can. And I'm going to just mix that in. The next thing to go in are the sweeteners. I would add sugar to this if I was using sugar, but I'm going to be using, I think, a combination of sugar and maple syrup. So half sugar, half maple syrup. There goes my half a cup of one. A little bit of salt. Giving that a stir. I can see some little lumps of baking powder that I'm breaking up with my spoon. And just making sure all those lumps are gone. Yeah, they used to say to sift things 3 times, but I think flour was lumpier back then. And also, it helps with precision. Next step, mix the wet ingredients together. If you have a 4-quart measuring cup, you can do this all in the measuring cup. So add the wet ingredients first so that you can measure them against the sides. So there's something milky. I'm using oat milk. Got a couple of eggs. Saving those eggshells for the compost. And I'm adding some maple syrup, my other sweetener. And because I didn't put it in before the eggs, I did have to measure it in a measuring cup. Ha ha. 50-50 hindsight, that's what I call that. And I've got some sunflower seed oil. Now, you can use butter too, but oil will actually give you a moister result because at room temperature, oil is a liquid and butter's not. So mixing that together with the spoon, or a whisk rather, getting that all smooth and nice. Then I'm going to mix the wet and dry ingredients and then add the fruit and nuts last. So believe it or not, these wet ingredients are all going to fit into that measuring cup. And I'm just not going to beat them. I'm just going to mix them lightly. You don't really want to liven up the gluten in that flour because that'll make it chewy, and you want your bread, you want yeast breads to be chewy, but quick breads should not be quite so chewy. So I'm just kind of making sure everything's wet and rather even. There'll still be some lumps, but that is not a big deal in this recipe, believe it or not. Some kind of magic happens in the oven. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't mind a few lumps. So I've got my nuts here, and I'm going to give those a chop. Some nice walnuts. And some blueberries. Going to rinse those. Pick out the ones that are wilty, saggy, or somehow not as good. I'm going to dump those in. And I'm just going to give the whole thing one last stir. Got a couple of escapees there. And there, it looks like it's just about mixed. Next step is to pour it into a greased loaf or muffin pan. I have chosen to line mine with parchment to make it even easier. Now, one thing you can do is you can save back or add some nuts to sprinkle on top if you would like to. I know that sometimes you get a bakery made muffin and it looks like it's loaded with fruit and nuts, and then you discover they're all on the top. But it's not that way when you make them at home. Don't forget to use a spatula. It is surprising how much a spatula will save in terms of extra batter that you have. There we go, evening it out a little, and it's ready to go into the oven. It is that quick. So we're going to make another loaf now. We're going to, again, preheat the oven, mix the dry ingredients. I've got my whole wheat flour there. It's very pale whole wheat flour. This is a local flour made by Wild Hive, and it is called Baguette Blend, and it's extra finely ground. Okay, I'm using all wheat flour here. Got my little bit of salt, the baking powder, again, leveling off those spoonfuls to make sure I've got the right amount. And this one is going to be apple and almond. In goes the sugar. Mixing that with the dry ingredients. And stirring that up, making sure it's well mixed. Just crushing the lumps with the edge, the bottom of my spoon. And I've got my 1-quart measuring cup all cleaned up and ready to go. Chopping my nuts. You can use all different kinds of nuts. You can use pecans, peanuts are really good, hazelnuts. You could also use sunflower seeds, pepitas or pumpkin seeds, flaked coconut, sesame seeds. Black walnuts are really good, but they're so strong that you'll just need to use less of those, probably about half as much. So getting those all chopped up and ready to go. So putting those all into a little dish. I've got an apple, a Cavallon Blanc apple from Wright's Fruit Farm, Whiteman's Fruit Farm. And I'm carving that up into very small slices. Just little tiny bite-sized bits. You don't want any of your fruit or nuts to be really that big unless you're using them decoratively on top. There we go. I've left the peel on because I believe that it adds flavor and texture, but you could peel that apple if you wanted to. It's your choice. Now I mix the wet ingredients again in the measuring cup. Oat milk again, because that's what I drink. And I'm going to be using some grapeseed oil with that this time. I'm going to measure it. Grapeseed oil is nice because it has a neutral flavor. It also has a high smoke point if you're sauteing things or frying things. So it's generally what I keep around is my neutral oil. It's also good in salad dressings. So there we go. And instead of egg in this one, I'm going to try using something called aquafaba, which is chickpea juice. This has a thickening quality like an egg yolk does. So I'm mixing that in with the liquid mixtures instead of 2 eggs. Now I'm making little muffin cups with one of my favorite tools, parchment paper. And what I did was I found a can that matched the size of the bottom of my muffin tin, which happens to be a tomato paste can. And I'm just taking the squares I've cut of parchment and wrapping them around and just popping them right into the muffin tin. It's very simple, but they look beautiful. And I will never buy paper muffin cup liners again. So I've got everything all set up there. I'm going to mix the dry and the wet ingredients together. Again, it all magically fits into that cup. Good old Pyrex. So again, mixing that up pretty gently. You don't need to get all the lumps out. Just getting that all mixed. So now it's time to add the fruit and nuts. So these are some rum raisins that I've made just by pouring a little rum over some raisins and letting them plump up for a little bit. Putting in the apples and then adding the almonds. If you add dried fruit to your loaves or muffins, it is good to let them soak in a little bit of water or juice or spirits, whatever you want to use to add to moisten them and add some extra flavor for a little while before you put them into your batter. So I'm getting these all stirred up. Next step is to pour and bake for about 35 minutes. So just going to, as neatly as possible, pour these into the muffin cups. It's interesting that all those little folds in the muffin cups don't create a problem. You want to fill those muffin cups just about 2/3 full. And there we go. Missed that one. And I saved a little almond so I could put one on top of each one. Ta-da! And into the oven they go. So you can test for doneness using a toothpick. You want to just put it right into the center and pull it out and make sure it's dry. And these little muffins look adorable. And the loaf comes right out with the parchment. I'm just going to tip that out. Looking beautiful. Now these are still very hot. Ideally, what you want to do is let these cool before you cut them. But you can see all the blueberry deliciousness in there. Just gotta taste this. Cool it a little bit. I really love the flavor of sunflower oil. So thanks for joining us for Turning the Table's healthy cooking class. You can find more information and recipes at turningthetablescookbook.com and check out our YouTube channel. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.